So for those of you who haven't been here regularly, we are currently on the topic of the Lamrim, which is the stages of the path to enlightenment. A really precious teaching that really encompasses the whole Buddhist path of all lineages and provides us a map, essentially, of whatever tradition we're understanding or learning from or teaching we're getting. We know where it goes on the path to enlightenment. And so we've begun our journey now. And we've laid a solid foundation, and we've entered a portion of the path which is our initial entry point. This is often called the small scope, or this is our initial motivation. And at this level of the path, the idea is that, good to see you. The motivation at this point is I would love to eliminate some of the suffering I have in my life, some of the difficulties and challenges, and set myself up for at least another good rebirth. That beyond this life, I'm doing everything in this life that will allow me to transition and continue on a good path when this body ends. So this is the initial motivation, or what we call a small scope. The medium scope would be, well, I want to get off this whole wheel of being reborn altogether and be totally liberated of karma and attain nirvana. And then the great scope is what we'd call attainment of complete Buddhahood, free of all imprints of karma, fully omniscient and purified. And so there's the initial, the medium, and this ultimate. And we're at the initial stages. And all too often we will want to jump to the ultimate. We need to begin where we are. And the really sweet thing that I find about this is by going gradually, this gradual path, it allows us to have the opportunity to test it. In other words, this is not just something born out of blind faith. This is something that I can test. I can try this out. I can work with this, and I can gain some faith that's based upon experience and not just a text I read somewhere or what somebody said. Ultimately, if we're going to succeed in this path, we're going to need some effort. And the only way you're going to provide effort is if you have some faith that it's going to get you somewhere. You know, we don't go to college unless we really think we're going to get a degree. And we don't, really buckle down on things and put a lot of effort in unless we have really a strong faith that we're going to get a result of some sort. So likewise, if we really want to progress in a path for enlightenment, we want to have some real sense and foundation that this is a path that works. And it's demonstrated, and I've tested it. And so along the way, we get our toe in the water, and we see what it's like. And then we try something, and we see a result, and we analyze it, and we think about it, we meditate on it, and we see if we're getting some results. And if you do, you continue on. So that's really the idea behind this path. So we've already covered some foundational aspects, and we've entered in to the topic of having a conviction, a faith in cause and result, and basically of karma, that there are effects to our actions and that they play out in our daily life. And so I think we had a pretty interesting discussion last week around the idea of karma and how that's created and how that manifests in our life. It's a very complicated topic. Really technical, and they, as I mentioned last week, my teachers will tell you that it is more difficult to have a direct realization of karma than it is to have a direct realization of the nature of phenomena, of how things are. So that's saying a lot, because it's pretty hard to see things with that direct realization of phenomena. And so rather than get bogged down in a lot of super technical pieces of karma. Our motivation here is always to make Buddhism really practical. My goal personally is to provide these Buddhist teachings that are traditional, that are authentic, that are within a lineage, but allow them to even be played out to someone who's not a Buddhist. Because you're going to find that this is really about the nature of existence itself, and these methods can help anyone improve the quality of their life. And if it doesn't hold up, it's not that useful. It's just not that useful. So here we don't want to dive in on blind faith, but we want to have an open and a clear, discriminating mind and see what works for us. So when we think about karma, so often it is pretty much presented as you do a bad thing and a bad thing happens. You do a good thing and a good thing happens. And on one level, there is some degree of truth to that. But it's not just a checkbook register. When we think about, last week we covered 10 non-virtuous actions. This is the top 10 list of things that get us into trouble. And then there's the opposite of that, the 10 virtuous actions. And these things really help us out. But even on those levels, that is within a realm of what we call conditioned existence. It means that even good karma is karma, right? The happiness I get out of doing something kind to someone isn't going to enlighten me. It's going to be a temporary, what we call a conditioned moment of happiness that'll come and go. And we will have throughout our whole life a lot of that. We've all had lots of happy moments. They've come and they've gone. We've had really pleasurable experiences. We've been really joyful, and we've also been really angry. And we've also been very disappointed, and we've been frustrated and anxious and nervous and happy and joyful. And all of these just come and go. And then it's Wednesday. And then it's Thursday. And then we just participate in life in this sort of cycle and flow of things come and go. So even the fact that I am doing things in my life that might be kind and generous and cultivate some degree of happiness or pleasurable experience, that's not going to change my conditioned existence overall. It's not going to get me out of conditioned existence, and it may not even ultimately create a good next life. It can create a really delicious meal. And so this is a piece we want to understand that, if we're looking at karma, we're really ultimately looking at the result of something that we think, say, and do, and there's an aftermath. Okay, what we think, say, or do creates an imprint. What we think, say, and do. Every movement of the mind. Karma is technically the word's action. It's any movement of the mind. Most of our movements of the mind are unconscious, right? Mostly we just do life, and we look for things that make us feel good, and we try to avoid things that are, not fun. And then things happen, and I react to them, and we aren't consciously reflecting upon the nature of life itself, when we're not consciously reflecting upon what's the healthiest, most meaningful thing to do right now. We might just be thinking, I'd like a burrito, okay? We're not thinking, is that the best choice, and where did the burrito come from, and all that, like a burrito. I had one for lunch. It was really good. It was delivered here, even. So anyway, don't get me on a food tangent. I can go there. So most of our life, we're really not challenging what's presented in front of us. We just see things, we feel things, we experience things, we react to things, and we operate out of what we call 8 worldly concerns. And so these 8 worldly concerns, when we reflect upon our life, they dominate everything that we do. Right? So, number 1, there's 4, and they're opposites. So there's things that we want, things we don't want. So if we really look at about everything that we do in life, they're going to be motivated by one of these concerns, pretty much. Gain and loss. I get really happy when I get what I want. To gain things, to get what I want, whether it's friendships, whether it's a new jacket when it's cold outside, whether it's a nice burrito, for example, at lunch. I'm happy when I get it. I do a lot to get things in my life. Gain a nice house, a car that works, whatever. And I am unhappy when I lose it, right? So gain and loss. I want to get things, and I don't want to lose them. There's a really wonderful chart I've seen. The value of something in our life. It's like these bar graphs, So like the value of something you want just before you buy it, it's like this high. You buy it, a week later, a month later, a year later, you lose it. It just became really valuable again. And so this gain and loss is kind of like that. We really are motivated to do things to get what we want, a house, a car, good food, relationship, whatever. And we really try not to lose them. Pleasure and pain. Okay? Pretty much from the time we wake up, aren't we looking to feel good? I mean, I am, right? I'm not waking up going, gee, how can I really suffer today? I'm looking at what's the best use of life today. Here's a day that'll never come again. We want to seek some pleasure. We're looking for pleasurable experiences, and we're looking to avoid painful ones. And in general, if you're not doing that, we can recommend a therapist or something, because that in itself is not an unhealthy thing. Praise and criticism. We like it when people praise us. It's nice when somebody gives you a compliment. And we don't like it when people criticize us too much. We do, in very subtle ways, we present ourselves in ways where we really want to avoid being criticized. And this really leads us to the last set, which is good reputation and bad reputation. We like it when we have a good reputation, when people are happy to see you. Yeah, hey, John, great, come on in. And we're not so happy when they think you're an idiot, Oh, there's John. Oh, my God, quick, close the door. And if we really kind of look at our life, from the moment we get up and how we participate and what clothes we put on and, how I'm going to dress and how I present myself to someone, we're going to be wrapped up in good reputation, pleasurable experiences, getting what I want. And this is just a driving force. And this is done unconsciously most of the time, really. And that's a mechanism that helps us really create a lot of karma. We create karma to get the things I want and create karma to try to avoid the things I don't want. And all of this is based, the real source of karma comes from a misperception. And this is the foundational problem. And if we can understand that, the rest of this talk on karma and how we purify it will really make a lot of sense. I'm not sure how I'm going to present it yet, but we'll see how it goes. If we understand the real mechanism for our conditioned existence here, and by conditioned, I mean conditioned by karma. And when we think about karma, I want you to understand it. It's not just, the events in our life. It's not just whether I feel good about something, have a pleasurable experience or an unpleasurable experience. It also has to do with your tendencies, your urges, your desires, your impulses. These are karmically induced. We have certain impulses for certain things, and they come up. And we're almost compelled to do many things. As a matter of fact, they talk about throwing karma. And that the karma that literally throws you into your next life, that propels you into a stream of existence. And so when we look at our life, you'll notice you have certain tendencies. You have certain impulses that pop up. You'll have certain desires that manifest. And you'll have certain habits, right? Well, that's all been created by you. That's the stream of consciousness that we tend to. And when we understand this, we start to understand that the world we're experiencing and how we're experiencing it has a lot more to do with me than objectively how it's appearing to me. The world that we live in, more accurately, is very subjective. We're having a very subjective experience. There's no measurable, unchanging, independent world outside of yourself. Doesn't exist. In fact, the three marks of existence are pretty straightforward. One is things are impermanent. Everything changes. Everything's changing all the time. We rarely see that. We don't think our house is changing. We don't think our job should change. We certainly don't think our partners should change. Man, they should stay the way I married them. And we think, my car should, run every day. We don't think things should change. As a matter of fact, especially our plans. Boy, they sure shouldn't have to change, right? I had a vacation plan. That shouldn't change. Things change. Everything's changing. Everything's impermanent, including our feelings and our thoughts, other people, the environment that we're coming in contact with. It's a constant state of flux. And all of the things that we see are interdependent with everything else. I'll touch on that in a minute. So one of the first truths is that things are impermanent, including us. Second truth, that the world outside that we are experiencing, conditioned existence itself that we experience, is ultimately unsatisfying. They call it dukkha. The nature of existence is in itself, sometimes they just call it suffering, but suffering doesn't really capture it. And it's very elusive because we don't think of it as suffering. It's hard to think of it as suffering when you're sitting in a jacuzzi, drinking a nice little Perrier. Doesn't feel like suffering. When in fact, what that actually is what we would technically call a tainted happiness or a conditioned happiness. You'll find that even that happiness is going to be temporary. And its nature won't last. That will never be satisfying. You sit in a jacuzzi too long, I'll guarantee you it'll become unpleasant. I've been there. Really hot one in Thailand. It's like 110. Your favorite song. Yeah, try listening to that 2,000 times. People in our lives will notice that, we'll love them in a moment, we'll get frustrated with them in another moment. That the outer circumstance, the conditions of our life, I'm going to get sick, I'm going to age, I'm going to die, there's no lasting sense of self here that's going to make it. And everyone I know, same way. And every experience I have, whether it gives me this sort of tainted happiness, this conditioned happiness, well, not only will it not last, it actually carries the seeds of my suffering. Everything that you value and you're attached to, doesn't it also cause you to suffer? Because what do you worry about? What do you angst over? What do you stress about? The very same things that will provide us happiness. House, job, car, relationship. Getting the jacuzzi the right temperature. That becomes an effortful task. And this becomes the stress and worry in our life. So we want to understand that the nature of this life itself is never going to provide any sense of real, pure, genuine, lasting happiness. Can't do it. And then the third mark of existence is the idea of what we'd say non-self. And often this seems complicated. It says, there's no I in you. Just kind of an interesting concept. That John, if I look for John, I'm not going to find him. There's not going to be some John in here. I can feel like I'm the same guy I was yesterday. But in fact, I'm not the same guy I was yesterday. I've learned a lot of different things today. My mind stream has changed today. My body has aged today. And my experience of life, of what I call John, is much more accurately like a river. It's constantly flowing. My experience of what I've learned, the emotions that have come and gone, the memories that I have, the memories I'm making now, the conversation I'm having, I'm growing and changing and learning and evolving day to day, and it's like a river. And you'll note that you never enter the same river twice, right? Wherever you enter, that's different water, and it's flowing. And so and this becomes the sort of root problem that creates all the other karma, is that I have a really strong sense of me, of John. And I have an idea that John is the same guy that was here yesterday, and the same guy that was 10 years ago, and the same guy who was a little kid learning how to ride a bike. But in fact, I don't look the same. My body's changed. My consciousness has changed. The feelings I've had have changed. The thoughts I have have changed. The way I see the world has changed. Everything about me has changed. And everyone you meet changes too. In fact, the world that we live in is coming back to the idea of a subjective experience. How you see and experience others, events, activities, is subjective. It's very subjective. The qualities that we attribute to things outside of yourself, including ourselves, the qualities we attribute to them are not existent in them. Okay? So, easy example, right? Find somebody attractive. Are they attractive? Is that inherently in them that they're attractive? And the answer is clearly no. Some people find someone attractive, someone else finds them not attractive. The attractive's not in them. That's a quality we attribute. And the world we live in is subjective. Attractive compared to what? Is somebody tall or is somebody short? In relation to what? How we experience food, whether, we've done this one a million times, whether I find it delicious or not delicious. Someone else finds it not delicious, I find it delicious. Where's the delicious? It's not in the food. The world we live in is a set of conditions. It's a phenomena arising, and I perceive it and experience it based on my karmic imprints, on how I've lived my lives. That I experience something as a pleasurable sound, and I like this song. Somebody else says, you like that kind of music? But I, through my lens of karma, experience it as something quite pleasant. Our problem is we actually think that is a good song. This is a delicious meal. Jimmy, he's a good guy. When in truth, none of those are true. What's more accurate is you're experiencing pleasurable feelings eating that meal. The meal is a condition from which I get a pleasurable experience. But where'd the pleasurable experience come from? Where's the delicious? You're going to find it's here. It's not there. This is a condition that, what do they call it, catalyzes the experience of pleasure when I eat it. Someone that I find attractive, likewise. I get an imprint and a pleasurable experience looking at them. But that's in my mind. It's in my consciousness. And if we start to understand this, we'll also understand that my consciousness and how I relate to myself and others is changing as well. And if I change my imprints, I can literally change the world around me. Which is really quite wonderful. Because if you can actually get rid of annoying people. And it's not because you get rid of them. they just no longer become annoying to you. Because where's the annoying? It's not in the person. It's in my experience of them. I change my karma, suddenly they're not annoying. And we all notice that our attitude and whether we feel good today has an influence on how I'm experiencing the day, right? We're tired, a little irritable, struggling. Best friend can be annoying, right? So we rarely go through life understanding this. So we would say in Buddhism, what Buddhism basically says is that all phenomena you encounter is empty. It's empty. It's not that it doesn't exist. It's merely empty of the qualities we're projecting on them. It's not inherently in those things. How I'm experiencing it is interdependent with each other. You know, if I see a mountain, well, the mountain's got to be there, and then I got to see it, and I have a feeling about mountains. Some people love mountains. Some people are city people, you know, and some people don't like to sit in dirt, and some people love being in dirt. How we experience stuff is a constant state of interdependence with the conditions that we're experiencing and the karma I've created in my life as to how I experience them. The fundamental problem is I don't see any of that. You know what I see? I see an annoying person named Jim. I see this as a really delicious salad. I see the jacuzzi as an awesome thing. One day I'm going to get one. And I see me as very independently John. And John is looking to have pleasurable experiences and avoid painful ones. And that just creates this cycle of karma. And the karma is fundamentally based in the idea that I exist independently and you exist independently. And out of that misperception, we create a lot of karmic imprints. And we don't really see the nature of things. We don't understand that there's not a annoying person in front of us. There's a human being. And what I'm actually doing is experiencing a feeling of being annoyed. And further, I'm not annoyed. I'm experiencing the feeling of annoyingness. And that will come and go. It's impermanent. I'm still going to be here. My thoughts will come and go. Still going to be here. My body will come and go, and my consciousness continues. That's an interesting one. And so, out of this misperception, we create a lot of karmic imprints and habits, and we create attachments and desires and impulses to get what we want, to do the things that make us feel good, thinking that those are the source of our happiness. And this is the source of my suffering. When in fact your mental and emotional happiness or suffering only has one cause. And it's here in my mind, it's not out there. The cause of a mental process can only be another mental process. If I see someone as annoying, and someone else can see them as interesting, where's the annoying? It's in my mind. It's in my mind thinking they should be different than they are. It's me labeling them and projecting qualities and having my own biases and preferences about how the world should be. Yeah. So if we start to understand this is really more how the world works, is that how I experience everything in this world has a lot to do with my own attitudes, has a lot to do with my perception, has a lot to do with my own attachments, has a lot to do with how I see myself and how I see others. Then we can start to understand how karma plays out in a way that we can change it. So last week we covered the idea of what we think, say, or do leaves an imprint. And there's a traditional, straightforward teaching on karma that talks about whatever thing we think, say, or do plants these imprints, and that those imprints, once planted, will ripen. That they grow. And one of the key ingredients is if you don't create a cause, you won't have a result. Right? You need a cause for a result. So in that approach, we start to understand that everything we think, say, or do matters. And that these seeds are planted in our consciousness, and they will ripen, and they ripen in a variety of ways. And there's, it's dependent upon conditions and others and events and so forth. But there's also this piece where we're coming to today, which is that you can purify karma. And there's a process of purification. And on one level, on an ultimate level, it even allows for karma to not ripen. So I want to present this in as thorough a way as possible so that we understand when we do a purification practice, we can do it on multiple levels and ultimately change the karma of our lives. And this is more important than just creating good karma, just doing virtuous things. Creating good karma, living an ethical life, and this is again at the initial scope of motivation, you will find that if you live an ethical life consciously with attention and motivation and purpose, that creates the conditions for a continued good rebirth. That's what they say. If you want another human life, another continuation of the life that you have, be ethical. Stop doing 10 non-virtuous things. Start doing 10 virtuous things. And consciously do it with some attention. And you're going to have a nice transition to a next life. And that's nice. It's good. But ultimately, we can remove this conditioned existence that we're participating in. We can literally purify our karma, because even the good karma keeps us conditioned. We can be free of karma. And so the starting point here is to take a look at some karmic imprints that we have created that we don't feel good about. Okay? So if I yelled at someone out of anger, if I got upset and reacted to somebody in an unhealthy way, if I stole something, and whatever it is that I've done that's planted, we'd just say an unwholesome seed. There's no, in Buddhism, there's not some big judgmental being that says this is good and that's bad. As a matter of fact, ultimately we would say there is no good and bad. Those are labels. And that's an important thing to understand when we purify karma. When they, on a conventional level, talk about virtuous activity and non-virtuous activity, what they're saying is any action that you create that gives a pleasurable result is virtuous. Any action that you create that gives you an unpleasurable result is non-virtuous. It's not so much the thing, it's just how it plays out in your life. And that we have found that when people do virtuous activities such as be generous, be kind, bring people together, help people and preserve life, these things will have pleasurable results. And that's the virtuous activity. Non-virtuous activity, killing, stealing, lying, etc., tends to create unpleasant experiences. Now, just on a very basic level, I think we can see this is true. When you do things that you feel good about, guess what happens? You feel good. When we do things we don't feel good about, we don't feel good. It's a pretty straightforward phenomenon. When even if I do something that provides me a pleasurable experience, if I didn't feel good about how I got there, It's going to be a bit tainted. Likewise, I can deal with some very difficult situations, but if I do it in a way I feel is valuable, then I can deal with it much better. And so this is really what we want to understand when we think about good karmic imprints and tendencies and unwholesome ones. Unwholesome ones are just going to create some problems in your life. And we all too often will put those 8 worldly concerns, gain, loss, pain, pleasure, praise, criticism, good reputation, bad reputation, over our ethics and values. And that's what creates a problem. If we have our ethics and values in mind, we're going to be honest whether it gives us gain or loss. We're going to be truthful and helpful whether or not we get praised or criticized. In other words, we're going to do the healthy things regardless of these 8 worldly concerns. And that is going to find the change and lasting peace in your life. So that's on a very conventional level. But as we enter into this, first we need to say that there's no good and bad people here. That's one of the traps we fall into. We fall into, I created some karma, or I did this, I'm a bad person. Everyone in this room has done wonderful things and has helped people. Everyone in this room has hurt people. Everyone in this room is a liar. And everyone in this room is a truther. It's the nature of our existence. We've all done things that are beneficial, and we've all done things that are not very beneficial. We've all hurt people, we've all helped people. We've hurt people with good intentions, and we've helped people with poor intentions. That's the nature of a confusing existence around looking at what's in it for me. And that's our root problem. John exists, and John wants to feel good. And John sees the world a certain way. And he divides them up into people I like and people I don't like. And naturally, the people I like think the way I do and have my values, and the people I don't like don't think the way I do and don't have my values, so clearly they're idiots. And that's how I label them. And then I treat them as such, and that's their qualities. And I don't see that even the people that don't agree with me still change their kids' diapers, still pay their bills, still take the neighbor's trash out, still do a myriad of wonderful things. But I judge them on one level, and they become that. And I see that as concrete. And now it's permanent instead of impermanent. So when we really think about karma, we also have to understand that our karma itself is not inherently existent. Including my good karma, and that it's changeable, and that things change. So things are impermanent, and karma has no inherent existence either, nor do I. In other words, I don't inherently exist, and when I say inherently exist, I mean that I'm independent and stagnant, non-changing. For me to exist, there's got to be a lot of conditions, not the least of which is some oxygen in the room. Not the least of which is food and nourishment. Not the least of which is all of the mental imprints that give rise to what I call John. Everything about me is dependent upon a lot of conditions. Air, food, nourishment. And how John arises changes from moment to moment and from situation to situation. Right now, I'm arising in the form of a Buddhist teacher. A little while, I was arising in the form of a commuter. A little while before that, I was arising as a parent. These labels come and these labels go, but they're not me. And how I appear becomes dependent upon the situations that I'm in. There's no self-existent, non-changing me. That's what we mean by inherently existent. There is something here, and I'm labeling it John. You won't find John. If you take my arm off, is that me? Take the leg off, is that me? Start tearing apart. And at what point does it stop being me? And so anyway, that's kind of understanding that we want to approach the idea of karma with is that I'm limited as to how I can truly see and experience the world, and the limitation itself is my own conditioning that I've created based on the karma I've created with my thoughts and actions and speech. If I change those, I change my experience of the world. And we can actually purify our karma and remove even some of the results of it. And key to it is understanding that karma itself is not inherently existent either. I'm going to pause right there because I've thrown a few things out and just check in to see if anyone has any questions. Clear. Perfect. All right. So how do we purify karma? And there's a process that we call in purification called the four opponent powers. So they're the direct opponent to the karma that's been created. So we can apply these four opponent powers. Let me just make sure I covered things here. In general, when we think about karma, I talked about, that's how we experience conditioned moments of pleasure or unpleasure. It also, the karma we create, think of it as, scientifically, neural pathways, right? Habits in our brain and neural pathways we have. The ones we use the most are really strong. Karma is the same way. Things that I continually do more and more, it creates a really strong habit, a really strong tendency, and a real strong perspective. And so if I keep thinking and seeing things a certain way through a certain worldview, I really reinforce that. So that's karma. We could also see that in neuroscience. What's the neuroscience say? Neurons that fire together wire together, right? You think about the same things, it creates neural pathways, habits, and conditionings. Likewise, karmically, if I continue to do certain things, I'm going to create certain habits, and I'm going to create certain experiences and certain urges and tendencies that will just be reinforced. So we do that a lot. And we tend to create similar results to things that we've done, same types of things. So most of this is done unconscious. Most of it's just a circle that we just get trapped in. Now to change it, if we think about four opponent powers, I present them in R's, 4 R's, okay? And number one is regret. Number one is an intelligent regret. So whatever activity, I'm going to just pick one of being, let's say, angry and yelling at someone, okay? Angry and yelling at someone. Well, I want to understand that first I want to acknowledge I did this. It's sort of the confessionally. I put it out there. I acknowledge out of anger, I yelled and I intentionally wanted to hurt this person's feelings. Well, right off the bat, you need to know this does not make you a good or bad person. It makes you human. Okay? We really, if we're going to approach this, want to get away from labels like good and bad. There's no inherently good or inherently bad. But there are more beneficial and more skillful things we can do, and there are less beneficial and less skillful things we can do. So when we talk about developing regret, we want to develop what's called an intelligent regret. In other words, I can see that I participated in anger and yelling, and I have a regret for it because I can just see it was not beneficial. It wasn't beneficial to me. It wasn't beneficial to the person. It didn't have a good outcome, even on a conventional level. And worse, it created stronger imprints for more anger and frustration in my life. So it's an intelligent regret based on reality, which says basically I understand that what happened here was not helpful. Not only did it create a problem here, it's really creating problems for the future, and it's reinforcing a habit that I don't like. I don't like to be angry. It's not good. And you know what? That other person, I'm not going to win them over by yelling at them. So the first piece is what we call an intelligent regret. That's pretty strong.
Rain starts with R.
Yeah, rain does start with R. So we want to rain down with intelligent regret. And so that's it. I acknowledge here's something I've done, and now I'm going to really take some time to see objectively how unbeneficial this was. It just wasn't beneficial. It just wasn't helpful, and it's creating a lot more force for the direction I don't want to go in life. You know, it's like the Emerson quote I use all the time. For every minute of anger you have, you will lose 60 seconds of happiness. You know, it's not really where I want to go. It's not how I want to spend my time. It's not what I want to reinforce. And it wasn't helpful to the other person, and it certainly didn't make the situation better. So we admit it. We apply the power of intelligent regret. Not guilt, not shame, not I'm a bad person. None of that. It's step back and just see karmically, look how this plays out. I was really attached to something, and that something doesn't really exist at all in the way that I think. And that moment of anger, guess what? It came and went, didn't it? And I wasn't even angry. I was experiencing some uncomfortable feelings of anger that are temporary, impermanent, and not me. And because of that, it clouded my ability to make a healthy choice. Now that's an intelligent regret. I don't want to be controlled by my anger. I don't want to have my emotions make choices for me. I would much rather be able to make healthy choices in my own life that are beneficial. Intelligent regret. The second power here then is a resolve. A resolve to not do this again. It's a firm resolve. Now, in a classic presentation of this, they'll say, if you can, to make a firm resolve to not do it for a specific period of time. If you could say, I'm never going to do that again, make a firm resolve. If you think you can do it for a week, if you think you can do it for a month. I don't like to lie to the Buddhas, and so, I figure I don't want to get, I'm trying to work some good angles here. So when I talk about a firm resolve, I really, in myself, generally make a statement that says, I am going to do my best to avoid the same activity for as long as I possibly can, whether it's a moment, a week, a year, or the rest of my life. That I'm really setting an intention when I feel that anger to not act on it, to try to hold back. And I might only hold back for a minute, I might only hold back for a period of time, but I'm really setting a strong resolve in this situation to not do that again for as long as I can. For me, I find that, accurate. The third one is what they call a refuge, and here I like the way he uses it. He calls it a safe direction, and it's a reaffirmation of our foundation. So this means that we take a moment to restore and reaffirm our foundation, our foundation of truth. We talked earlier about refuge, about what is it we can actually depend upon, and really bring our mind back to what we can depend upon. And in this case, from a Buddhist point of view, our safest refuge is the three jewels, Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. That these qualities of Dharma is the nature of reality itself. That I can rely upon. The Buddhas of enlightened teachings that lead to this path. That's something we need to cultivate a reliance upon. You don't get it just because somebody tells you there's Buddhas and they're omniscient. Over time, you need to see if these teachings lead you to that. And then the community of enlightened beings and teachings that provide that support. So So this third one is really, I like it, it's a safe direction, something I can depend upon, and infuse that with bodhicitta, the great compassion, a desire to remove the suffering of all living beings. So it's really nice to be able to, here I am in my meditation, I'm bringing up this event of me yelling in anger, and as I observe it, I really see that I was attached to a sense of self and the way things should go, and I wanted something to happen, and they were blocking me from getting my way, and out of that anger I yelled, and I created more anger and more resentment and division. And I see that's, all that does is keep me propelled in a conditioned existence. And it creates causes for more anger and more habits, more tendencies of anger. It wasn't accurate. So I regret that. And I make a resolve when I feel that anger again to understand that it's just a feeling. And that I can understand the impermanent nature of it and look at this other human being who's just like me, who has their own values and thoughts and desires, and respond to them in a way that might actually get a healthy result. A resolve to see and handle it differently. Resting this resolve in something I can rely upon, the actual nature of how things work. That my environment is subjective, that things are impermanent, that this conditioned existence is something that is limiting me. I can depend upon the fact that if I work on my understanding of phenomenon, I can remove all of this suffering. And if I can do that well, I can help everybody else. Bodhicitta. And then the fourth one, I'll use another R, is a remedial action. Do something that will counteract the harmful activity. So something virtuous for something non-virtuous. There's a whole list of things we can do. A lot of Buddhists will do mantras or prayers for all living beings. The most powerful thing they say that you could do is really meditate on emptiness, on the nature of reality. The most purifying thing we can do is cut the root. The root of our suffering, the root of the causes of karma is that I misperceive things. I don't see them as empty. I see them as very concrete, very real, and the cause of my happiness or my suffering. And if I can take a little time to meditate on their empty nature, that these qualities are being projected, that they're interdependent with how I feel and how I'm experiencing them, is an incredibly purifying experience. But on a very simple thing, taking a little time to do a mala of prayers for all living beings, really wanting to remove their suffering, doing a metta practice of loving kindness, expanding that out to the world, doing some Tonglen meditation. Tonglen meditation is where we visualize taking upon ourselves the suffering of others and then meditating and with our out-breath, giving them all of our virtues and seeing them get well and healthy. These are really virtuous activities that offset the non-virtuous. So these become the four opponent powers. And on a very conventional level, what you can see is if you do that in a meditation, what you're going to do is you're going to start counteracting the habits and conditions we create that are unwholesome and actually start creating new conditions, tendencies, and habits. What we water grows. What we think about continues to flourish. Neurons that fire together wire together. Even if you're not a Buddhist, if you take some time and look at the unhealthy behaviors and habits we have, recognize how they create problems, and then think about how you would do it differently, you're creating new neural pathways, new tendencies, and a healthier way to respond when you're in an unhealthy state of mind again. On an ultimate level, within Buddhism and the nature of empty phenomenon, you're literally cutting at the very root of karma that keeps us trapped. So, if we have time, I just wanted to explain a couple, I find quite fascinating, teachings on how each one of these opponent powers helps us. So, just our mental factors, like the heaviness of a karma, the weight of a karma, anything that happens, the strongest weight of it has to do with our motivation. If I yell out of anger and I really want them to suffer, that's going to have a whole different weight than if I yell out of concern. Right? You see your kid doing something and you yell, but you're really yelling out of a concern. They may hurt themselves versus I really want you to suffer. Different weight. And so most of the times we just do things, we justify them, we feel pretty good about it. That guy tried to cheat me, I yelled at him, I set him straight, I feel pretty good about it. Well, that's not going to be healthy. So I'd say that by admitting a mistake, it actually opposes a transgression as seen as detrimental. You know, if I keep justifying, this allows me to say, you know, it's a problem. And that lessens its weight. The regret opposes the idea of delighting in this activity. And so it's going to lessen the weight. If I actually start to see later, you know, this wasn't skillful, it wasn't healthy, the weight, because when I did it, I felt pretty damn justified. And now the weight of that shifts because I can start to really see it wasn't healthy, it wasn't well. Trying not to repeat the action opposes the intention of stop. So it actually allows us to shift how we're going to live our life. And the safe direction opposes having no moral self-dignity and no care for how our actions are with others. And this is important. There's a really fascinating line that as people learn Buddhism is to understand that things are empty, right? They're not inherently existent, including karma. So one might go, well, then nothing matters. And now you're in an extreme of nihilism. There's nothing that matters. And that's a problem because, in fact, everything matters. Everything matters. So how do you adjust for the idea that the world we live in is subjective and there is no concrete good or bad, concrete way that things exist, and yet everything I do matters? Because everything you do does matter. It will all have a consequence. Understanding this and using some wisdom with it allows us to change our whole experience of things. So we don't want to get caught up in the nihilistic idea that nothing matters. Things are empty of inherent existence, yes, but they are dependent upon each other, and how I experience things is the result of how I've lived my life, and everything matters. But everything doesn't matter as much as we worry about either. So then we got the other extreme where we're constantly analyzing every little thing that we do, and then we're saying, oh, I'm such a bad person because I did this. When in fact, the this that you did is not permanent. You did one thing that was harmful, you did 100 things that were helpful, you know, and we want to get away from that too and not take it so to where it actually creates stress and fear in our life, that we want a balance. It's called a middle path. A middle path where things matter. And I can change things. And if I do something stupid, guess what? I can work on changing that. If I did something really good, you know, I want to work on improving that. But it's all transitory. And applying the constructive actions opposes, you know, allowing it to grow. So that the negative karma that we created would grow. But here, by applying an action that is really virtuous and conducive, it opposes that growth of a tendency or habit. There's a deeper level that these take place, which really addresses our mind. It's a shift from incorrect consideration into a more correct one. And ultimately what it does is it shifts our view from delusion to one of wisdom. And you can see if you went through these four opponent powers, you're going to accumulate some wisdom in that. If you look at any situation that you participated in and stepped back from it and got out of the emotional entanglement and asked yourself, what's the healthy thing to do here? You're going to gain some wisdom there. And so it's going to correct that shift. But at the core of all of this is that everything that we do, if we can apply and just crack the door open a little bit to the nature of emptiness, the nature of phenomenon is actually being a very subjective experience that doesn't inherently have the qualities that we project on them. And that's a game changer, just cracking the door. If you actually were to look at somebody, Jimmy, and you think, you know what, Jimmy's not really a jerk. I experience him as a jerk. I label him a jerk, and when I see him, I want to avoid him. But in truth, all day long, Jimmy does things that are not jerky. Right? Feeds the kids, goes to work, cooks breakfast, nothing jerky about that. Probably cares about his kids and might even pay his taxes. He did one thing that I didn't like and he becomes a jerk. And then I see him as a jerk and that becomes stagnant. And that's what we're talking about. When you notice, there's a tip-off when you're living in delusion, is when you see things as stagnant and unchanging. You're in a trap. Because that's not how things are, including yourself. And we limit ourselves that way as well. I am like this. I'm a morning person. I'm a night person. I'm a good dancer. I'm, whatever I think I am, are also subject to change. You can learn to play a musical instrument. If you are not a morning person, trust me, you go to the monastery, they wake you up at 5 in the morning every day. You become a morning person. Things change. Not good at language? Yeah, get stuck in a foreign country. You're going to pick up a language pretty quick. Learn where the bathroom is and how to get some good food and how to relate to people. All those things are changing. So things about ourselves that we really hang on to are also changing. And that we ultimately are creating our experience of the world with our thoughts, our speech, and our actions. So it does matter. But again, even when we screw up, we have the potential to change all that. And that's what these four opponent powers do. So I would invite you, if you would like, I can email you an outline of the four opponent powers. So those of you online or those of you here, just email us at Way of Compassion, and I'll just email you a nice little outline by Venerable Tubden Chodron, which kind of goes through the four opponent powers and how you can do that in a meditation. But my teacher, his advice to us was pretty straightforward and simple. When you have the precious opportunity to receive teachings that remove suffering and lead to enlightenment, well, at this point now, you got a job. One is stop doing unhealthy things. Start doing healthy things. Right? Stop doing non-virtuous activities and start doing virtuous ones. And every night purify. Purify the stuff we've already done. And what I'll do next week is I'll actually guide us through a purification meditation. So I was hoping to do that today, but we've run out of time. So next week, instead of the normal 24-minute at the start, what we'll do is we'll do a nice little purification practice. And we'll have a little time to really bring a situation in and see about purifying it. And so you can see how that works in your life. Okay? All right. Well, wonderful. Let's, take a little time, do a dedication. When you think about karma and imprints and how things are weighted, we had a nice motivation at the start. We set a good, strong intention. We participated in this activity for the benefit of all beings, gaining virtue and wisdom. And now we can dedicate it. We can take this virtue and wisdom accumulated and put it in the ocean of merit for all living beings. That way it doesn't get so used up. Let us dedicate the virtue and wisdom that we have accumulated both here today and throughout our lives, both individually and collectively. Let us dedicate this for the benefit of all beings. May all beings be free of suffering and find lasting happiness. May we also be able to use the virtue and wisdom accumulated here today and throughout our lives to purify our own minds, to cultivate the wisdom of enlightenment, so that we can truly be free of karma and be able to lead all beings out of suffering. All right, thank you all so much. Joy and a pleasure to be with all of you and all of you online as well. Again, tomorrow night, if you're interested in helping with the monks visit, that's great. And as always, try to stay out of trouble. Yeah, that's always good advice. All right, be well. Thank you.